The massive crystalline halls of the Galactic Tribunal echoed with the footsteps of beings from across the known universe. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked between towering pillars that seemed to stretch into infinity, her human frame dwarfed by the architectural grandeur designed to intimidate lesser species. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity was considered one of those lesser species. Sarah had been Earth's representative for 3 years, fighting an uphill battle for humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council. Every session felt like swimming against a tsunami of prejudice and fear. The other species saw humans as violent, unpredictable, and dangerously innovative. They weren't entirely wrong, Sarah thought grimly, but they failed to see the other side of humanity's nature. The tribunal chamber was a perfect sphere. Its walls made of some material that shifted between transparency and opacity depending on the speaker's needs. Today, it remained clear, allowing the gathered representatives to see the vast star field beyond. Representatives from 47 different species sat in floating platforms arranged in concentric circles, with the tribunal's 5 judges positioned at the center. Judge Zarthak, a being that resembled a walking tree with eyes like burning coals, called the session to order. His voice resonated through the chamber without any visible technological assistance, a reminder of the ancient powers that governed galactic law. Today we address the matter of species designation for Sol 3, commonly known as Earth, Zarthak announced. Ambassador Chen, you may present humanity's final appeal. Sarah stood on her platform, feeling the weight of 8 billion human lives resting on her shoulders. She had prepared this speech for months, consulting with Earth's best minds. But standing here now, she realized none of it would matter. The decision had already been made. Honored judges, esteemed representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I stand before you not just as Earth's ambassador, but as living proof that humanity deserves a place among the galactic community. We are not the monsters you believe us to be. A low rumble of disapproval rippled through the chamber. Representative Gillix of the crystalline hive clicked his mandibles dismissively. The human speaks of peace, while her species wages constant war upon itself. Even now, conflicts rage across their home world. Sarah had expected this. Yes, we have conflicts, but we also have art, literature, music that moves souls across species barriers. We have compassion that drives us to save complete strangers, even at cost to ourselves. We have curiosity that pushes us to explore the unknown, not to conquer, but to understand. Understanding. The voice belonged to Counselor Viridian, whose serpentine form coiled around his platform. Your species' understanding led to nuclear weapons within decades of discovering atomic structure. Your curiosity created artificial intelligences that nearly destroyed your civilization. Your compassion is reserved only for those you consider worthy. The accusations stung because they held grains of truth. Sarah gripped her podium harder. Every species in this chamber has a dark history. The Veltar enslaved 3 systems before joining the Council. The Jirai consumed their own moon's ecosystem for rare minerals. The difference is that humanity admits our flaws and works to overcome them. Judge Mordun, whose crystalline body refracted light into rainbow patterns, leaned forward. The question is not whether humanity can change, but whether the galaxy can survive humanity's presence long enough for that change to occur. Sarah felt the momentum slipping away. These beings had already decided. They saw humanity's potential for both creation and destruction, and fear won over hope. She tried one last approach. I ask you to consider what humanity has accomplished in just the past century. We went from horse-drawn carriages to interstellar travel. We went from tribal warfare to global cooperation on challenges like disease and natural disasters. We have the fastest technological advancement rate of any known species, not because we're reckless, but because we're driven to improve. Precisely the problem, interjected Representative Cathara, her insectoid features clicking with agitation. Humans advance too quickly, adapt too rapidly. You are unpredictable. The Galactic Council requires stability, predictability, order. We require species that follow established protocols, added Judge Zenthari, his gaseous form shifting colors with emotion. Humanity's tendency toward innovation disrupts carefully balanced systems. Your people cannot be trusted to maintain the status quo that has kept peace for millennia. Sarah realized then that humanity's greatest strength was seen as its greatest weakness. The galaxy had achieved peace through stagnation, through rigid adherence to ancient rules that prevented change. Humanity threatened that stability simply by existing. If innovation and progress are crimes, Sarah said quietly, then perhaps this galaxy deserves the stagnation it has chosen. The chamber erupted in angry voices from dozens of species. Judge Zarthak's voice boomed over the chaos. The defendant shows the exact arrogance and disrespect that makes humanity unsuitable for galactic society. Sarah stood straighter. I show the honesty that every species here lacks. You fear us not because we're evil, but because we represent change. You've built a civilization that prioritizes stability over growth, conformity over creativity. We threaten that because we refuse to stagnate. Enough, Zarthak declared. The tribunal has heard sufficient evidence. We will now deliberate. The judges' platforms moved to form a tight circle, and the sphere's walls became opaque. Sarah could only wait, though she already knew the outcome. Around her, representatives from other species whispered among themselves, some with satisfaction, others with what might have been regret. The deliberation lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the walls cleared, the judges had returned to their positions. Judge Zarthak spoke with the weight of absolute authority. The Galactic Tribunal finds humanity unsuitable for inclusion in galactic society. Furthermore, given the species' unpredictable nature and rapid advancement, Earth is hereby classified as a quarantine zone. No galactic species may make contact with Sol 3 or its inhabitants. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. A quarantine classification was worse than simple rejection. It meant complete isolation, cutting humanity off from all galactic trade, knowledge, and technology. It was a death sentence for human space exploration and development. This is more than rejection, Sarah protested. You're condemning humanity to technological imprisonment. We are protecting the galaxy from a dangerous variable, Judge Mordun replied coldly. Humanity's quarantine will remain in effect until such time as your species demonstrates stable, predictable behavior for no less than 10,000 galactic standard years. The absurdity of the timeline wasn't lost on Sarah. 10,000 years was longer than all recorded human history. It was impossible, and the judges knew it. They were effectively banishing humanity forever. There is one additional matter, Judge Zenthari added, his gaseous form shifting to a darker hue. Ambassador Chen, as the official representative of a quarantined species, you cannot be permitted to return to Sol 3. You will be detained to prevent contamination of galactic society with quarantined knowledge. Sarah's heart stopped. I'm human. I belong with my people. You have been exposed to galactic technology and knowledge, Judge Zarthak explained with what might have been sympathy. Returning this information to a quarantined species would violate our most fundamental laws. You will be held in comfortable detention for the remainder of your natural lifespan. The platform beneath Sarah's feet began to glow, indicating the activation of a transportation beam. She was about to be whisked away to some comfortable prison where she would live out her days knowing that she had failed her entire species. Wait, she called out, her voice cutting through the murmur of satisfied representatives. I invoke the right of final words. The judges exchanged glances. The right of final words was an ancient law that allowed any being to speak without interruption before accepting their fate. It couldn't change the outcome, but it was considered sacred among all galactic species. "Very well," Judge Zarthak said reluctantly. "You have 3 minutes." Sarah took a deep breath, looking out at the assembled representatives who had just condemned her species to eternal isolation. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made several beings shift uncomfortably. "You call humans dangerous because we change, because we grow, because we refuse to accept limitations. You're right. We are dangerous, but not in the way you think." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Humans are dangerous because we represent possibility. We're dangerous because we prove that species can evolve beyond their nature, that progress doesn't have to end, that the future doesn't have to look like the past." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the judges leaned forward to hear her words. "You've built a galaxy-wide civilization based on fear. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of losing what you have. You've convinced yourselves that stagnation equals peace, that conformity equals harmony. But you're wrong." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "True peace comes from growth, from learning, from becoming better than what you were. Humanity would have brought that to this galaxy. We would have shown you that progress and peace can coexist." She looked directly at each judge. "Instead, you've chosen fear. You've quarantined the one species that could have helped this galaxy reach its true potential. And in doing so, you've revealed the greatest truth about your supposedly advanced civilization." The transportation beam began to intensify around her. Sarah smiled grimly. "You're not advanced. You're not evolved. You're just very, very old. And old things that refuse to change eventually become extinct." The beam reached full power, but before it could transport her away, Sarah spoke one final sentence that would haunt the Galactic Council for years to come. "Humanity remembers, and humanity never gives up. This isn't over." The transportation beam activated, and Ambassador Sarah Chen vanished from the tribunal chamber, leaving behind a silence so complete that the ambient sounds of the station seemed thunderous in comparison. The representatives began to disperse, but many carried with them an uncomfortable feeling that they had just made a terrible mistake. Judge Zarthak remained in his position long after the chamber emptied, staring at the spot where the human ambassador had stood. Her final words echoed in his mind. And for the first time in his centuries of service, he wondered if the tribunal had chosen wisdom or merely fear. In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations detected something unusual. Ships bearing Earth's insignia were being recalled from all corners of human space. Emergency broadcasts were being transmitted on all frequencies, and deep within the Sol system, ancient defense protocols that had been theoretical for decades were suddenly being activated. The Galactic Council had made their decision about humanity. Now they would discover what humanity had decided about them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 months after Ambassador Chen's transportation to detention. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered in unprecedented numbers, their usual diplomatic composure replaced by obvious anxiety. The reason for their concern hung in the holographic display at the chamber's center, a complete map of human space, now eerily empty of all civilian traffic. Director General Elias Kane stood in the Council's observation deck, watching the alien representatives argue among themselves. Unlike Sarah Chen, Kane had never been an official diplomat. He was a soldier, a strategist, and the current head of Earth's most classified military division. His presence here wasn't diplomatic courtesy, it was a declaration. Kane's transport had arrived at the station 12 hours earlier, broadcasting on all frequencies a simple message: Earth requests immediate audience regarding the tribunal's recent decision. What made every being in the galaxy nervous was that Kane's ship had somehow bypassed 3 different security cordons without being detected until it chose to announce itself. The chamber's main display shifted to show footage from various monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Every screen told the same story. Human ships, from massive colony vessels to small research craft, were disappearing from galactic space. They weren't being destroyed. They were simply vanishing, as if humanity was pulling back from any contact with the wider galaxy. Counselor Viridian's serpentine form coiled with agitation as he addressed his fellow representatives. The humans are implementing some kind of systematic withdrawal. Our trade routes that depended on human shipping companies have gone silent. Human colonies in neutral space are being evacuated. Perhaps they're simply accepting the quarantine, suggested Representative Cathara, though her clicking mandibles betrayed her nervousness. This could be compliance with the tribunal's decision. Director General Kane's voice cut through the chamber with military precision. May I address the council? Judge Zarthak, who had been unusually quiet since the tribunal, gestured for Kane to speak. The human's platform descended to the chamber's center, placing him where Ambassador Chen had stood months earlier. The contrast was striking. Where Chen had been diplomatic and hopeful, Kane radiated controlled danger. Honored representatives, Kane began, his tone formal but lacking Chen's warmth. I come before you not to appeal the tribunal's decision, but to inform you of humanity's response to it. The chamber fell silent. This wasn't what they had expected. Earth accepts the quarantine, Kane continued. We understand that you view humanity as too unpredictable, too dangerous for galactic society. We disagree with your assessment, but we respect your right to make it. Several representatives exchanged confused glances. This wasn't the defiant human resistance they had prepared for. Kane's expression hardened slightly. However, the tribunal made one critical error in its ruling. You sentenced Ambassador Chen to detention, claiming she possessed dangerous knowledge that couldn't be returned to a quarantined species. This action transformed a diplomatic quarantine into an act of war. The chamber erupted in protests. Judge Morden's crystalline form flashed with indignation. The detention of your ambassador was necessary to prevent— You kidnapped our diplomatic representative, Kane interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. In human law, in every civilized legal system I'm aware of, taking an ambassador prisoner is an act of war, the quarantine we might have accepted. Taking one of our people hostage crossed a line you didn't even know existed. Counselor Viridian raised his head, his serpentine neck extending to its full height. You dare threaten this council? Your entire species is confined to one system. We have the combined might of 47 civilizations. Kane smiled, and something in that expression made several representatives lean back involuntarily. You misunderstand the situation. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here to deliver a formal declaration. The human's platform rose slightly, and the chamber's displays changed to show new images. Ships, massive, sleek vessels unlike anything in the galactic database, were emerging from what appeared to be empty space around Earth's solar system. For the past century, Kane explained calmly, humanity has been preparing for the possibility that we might not be welcomed by galactic civilization. We hoped for friendship, but we prepared for hostility. Every human you've encountered, every ship you've seen, every technology we've shared, it all represents roughly 5% of humanity's actual capabilities. The images showed more ships, their designs clearly human, but incorporating technology that made the representatives' own vessels look primitive. Weapons that seemed to bend space itself, shields that phased in and out of visible reality, drives that left no energy signature. The quarantine zone you've established around Sol extends roughly 50 light-years in all directions. Kane continued. What you didn't realize is that humanity has been operating beyond that zone for 70 years. The colonies you think you're containing are decoys. Our real settlements exist in dimensions you haven't discovered yet. Representative Gillicks's mandibles clicked rapidly. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected interdimensional technology. Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect, Kane replied matter-of-factly. Humanity learned long ago that the greatest weapon is not being seen as a threat until you're ready to act. Ambassador Chen's mission wasn't just diplomacy, it was reconnaissance. For 3 years, she gathered intelligence on every species, every technology, every weakness in your civilization. The chamber's atmosphere grew thick with fear. Judge Zenthari's gaseous form shifted through several color spectrums. You're claiming your entire diplomatic mission was espionage? I'm claiming that humans plan for multiple scenarios, Kane corrected. Chen genuinely wanted peace. Her efforts to gain humanity's acceptance were sincere, but she was also gathering the information we'd need if diplomacy failed. Every human is trained to serve multiple purposes. The displays shifted again, showing surveillance footage from dozens of galactic worlds, humans walking among alien populations, working in their cities, learning their technologies. All of them had seemed like innocent traders, tourists, or refugees. Now the council was seeing them with new context. How many? Judge Zarthak asked quietly. How many what? How many of your people have infiltrated our worlds? Kane considered the question. Define infiltrated. If you mean humans living peacefully among your populations, contributing to your societies while quietly observing and learning, about 2 million spread across 300 worlds. The number sent a shockwave through the chamber. 2 million humans embedded in the heart of galactic civilization, and no one had suspected they were anything more than refugees or immigrants seeking better lives. They're not spies in the traditional sense, Kane clarified, noting the panic spreading among the representatives. They're families, individuals, people who genuinely built lives among you, but every human carries the same basic training. Observe, adapt, survive, and report. It's not sinister. It's simply how we approach any new environment. Counselor Viridian's voice cracked slightly. What do you want? Kane's expression grew cold. We want Ambassador Chen returned, immediately and unharmed. We want formal recognition that her detention was illegal under galactic law, and we want compensation for the diplomatic insult. And if we refuse, Judge Morden asked, then you'll discover why the galaxy should have feared humanity, Kane replied simply. The quarantine you've imposed works both ways. You've cut yourselves off from human innovation, human trade, human cooperation. What you haven't cut yourselves off from are the 2 million humans already living among you. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The representatives were beginning to understand that humanity hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been preparing for a very specific type of war. Those humans living on your worlds, Kane continued, they've been studying your societies, your technologies, your defense systems, not to destroy them, but to understand them. Humans don't conquer through force when patience and knowledge work better. Representative Kthara's voice was barely a whisper. What have you done? Nothing yet, Kane assured her. But every human in galactic space received the same transmission when Ambassador Chen was taken prisoner. They're now operating under Catastrophe Protocol, a set of emergency procedures designed for exactly this scenario. The displays changed one final time, showing technical readouts that made several representatives gasp. Power grids, communication networks, transportation systems, defense networks, all with human-made modifications that had been installed over years of peaceful cooperation. Humans are builders, Kane explained. Wherever we go, we improve things. We make systems more efficient, more reliable, more interconnected. Every improvement we've made to your infrastructure over the past decade includes what you might call a back door, a way for us to shut it down or take control if necessary. The scope of the revelation was staggering. Humanity hadn't just infiltrated galactic society, they had become integral to its operation. Every major world, every important station, every critical system had human fingerprints on it. Judge Zarthak finally found his voice. "You're holding our entire civilization hostage." "We're demonstrating that quarantine was never an option," Kane corrected. "Humanity is already part of this galaxy, whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is whether that participation will be cooperative or corrective." Kane gestured to the displays around them. "Every system you're looking at can be restored to its original state with a single command from Earth. We have no desire to damage your civilizations or harm your people, but Ambassador Chen's continued detention is unacceptable." The silence stretched for long minutes as the Council grappled with their new reality. They had tried to quarantine humanity, only to discover that humanity had already spread throughout their civilization like seeds in fertile soil. "How do we know you won't activate these systems anyway?" Counselor Viridian asked. Kane's expression softened slightly. "Because humans prefer cooperation to domination. We want to be part of this galaxy, not rule it, but we won't be caged. And we won't allow our people to be held prisoner for the crime of representing us." Judge Morden's crystalline form dimmed with what might have been resignation. "And if we return your ambassador and formally apologize for her detention?" "Then we continue as we have been," Kane said simply. "Humans living and working among you, contributing to galactic society, proving that we deserve a place here. The only difference is that now you know we're here not as supplicants but as equals." The Council faced an impossible choice: maintain the quarantine and risk the collapse of their technological infrastructure, or admit that they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity's position in the galaxy. Kane waited patiently as the representatives whispered among themselves, their earlier confidence replaced by the uncomfortable realization that they had never been in control of this situation. "We require time to consider your demands," Judge Zarthak finally announced. Kane nodded. "Ambassador Chen has been in detention for 3 months. Every day she remains imprisoned. The catastrophe protocol automatically escalates. I suggest you don't take too much time with your considerations." As Kane's platform began to rise, preparing to transport him back to his ship, he offered one final thought. "The tribunal was right about one thing. Humans are unpredictable. But what makes us truly dangerous isn't our capacity for violence. It's our refusal to accept limitations that others impose on us." The chamber fell silent as the human disappeared, leaving the Galactic Council to confront a reality they had never imagined. They weren't dealing with a primitive species seeking admission to galactic society. They were dealing with a civilization that had already made itself indispensable to that society while hiding in plain sight. The quarantine hadn't contained humanity. It had simply revealed how thoroughly humanity had already spread throughout the galaxy, and how much power they wielded through patience and preparation rather than force. Now, the Council had to decide whether to acknowledge that reality or test humanity's resolve to maintain it. The rescue of Ambassador Sarah Chen from her detention facility on Kepler Station took exactly 43 minutes. The operation was carried out by a single human operative who walked through 17 different security checkpoints, disabled 42 automated defense systems, and extracted Chen from a supposedly impregnable facility without firing a single shot or harming a single guard. Security footage showed a woman in maintenance coveralls who seemed to belong wherever she was. Guards nodded to her politely. Automated systems registered her credentials as valid. Locked doors opened at her approach. By the time station security realized what had happened, both women had vanished into the general population of the massive trading hub. The Galactic Council was still in emergency session, debating Director General Kane's ultimatum, when news of the rescue reached them. The implications were staggering. If humans could extract someone from their most secure facility without detection, what else could they do? Judge Zarthak called for order as the chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives who had felt secure in their advanced technology and superior numbers now faced the uncomfortable reality that humanity had capabilities they hadn't even suspected. The detention facility was designed to hold beings with far greater physical capabilities than humans, Representative Cathara said, her mandibles clicking with agitation. The security protocols should have been impossible to bypass. Unless someone had helped design those protocols, Counselor Viridian observed grimly. He was learning to think like a human, considering angles that the galaxy's rigid, predictable species would never have imagined. On Earth, Sarah Chen stood in the command center of humanity's true capital, a sprawling underground complex beneath what appeared to be a simple research facility. The technology surrounding her was decades ahead of anything the Galactic Council possessed, yet it had been built using principles and materials that humanity had learned from their 3 years of diplomatic contact. How many of the Council species have humans working in their infrastructure? Sarah asked Director General Kane as she reviewed the intelligence reports from across the galaxy. All of them, Kane replied simply. Even the most xenophobic species needed human expertise in certain areas. We're good at fixing things, improving systems, making everything work better. It's what we do. Sarah studied the holographic display showing the current state of galactic civilization. Every major system had human modifications, human improvements, human oversight. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy through force. They had made themselves indispensable to its operation. The Council doesn't understand what they're really afraid of, Sarah observed. They think we're dangerous because we're violent or unpredictable. They can't see that we're dangerous because we're useful. Kane nodded. Every species in the galaxy has developed within rigid parameters. They evolved to fill specific niches, follow specific patterns. Humans evolved to be adaptable, to find solutions, to thrive in any environment. That's what terrifies them. The communication console activated, showing an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Judge Zarthak's ancient face appeared in the hologram, his expression mixing resignation with what might have been respect. Director General Kane. Ambassador Chen, the judge began formally. The Council has reached a decision regarding your demands. Sarah stepped forward. I'm listening. The Council formally acknowledges that your detention was a violation of diplomatic law, Zarthak said carefully. We offer our apologies and are prepared to discuss compensation for this diplomatic error. Kane exchanged glances with Sarah. This was progress, but they both sensed there was more coming. However, Zarthak continued, the original quarantine ruling stands. Humanity's capabilities, as recently demonstrated, confirm our assessment that your species represents a destabilizing force in galactic civilization. Sarah felt a familiar frustration rising. Even when presented with evidence of human restraint and precision, the Council chose to see only the threat. They were determined to fear humanity rather than understand it. Judge Zarthak, Sarah said calmly, you're missing the fundamental point. The quarantine was never possible. Humanity is already integrated into galactic civilization at every level. You can't quarantine us any more than you can quarantine your own circulatory systems. The judge's expression grew more troubled. The Council recognizes the complexity of the situation. We propose a compromise. Humanity may maintain its current presence in galactic space, but no further expansion will be permitted. No new human colonies, no additional human settlements, no increase in human influence. Kane stepped into view of the transmission. Judge, with respect, you're still thinking in terms of controlling humanity. You can't control a species that refuses to be controlled. Sarah gestured to the data streams flowing around them. Every human in galactic space is currently receiving updates on this conversation. They're also receiving updated instructions based on the Council's response. The Catastrophe Protocol isn't just about shutting down systems. It's about showing the galaxy what happens when humanity stops contributing to it. As if to emphasize her point, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. On Veltar Prime, the agricultural systems that fed 2 billion beings had mysteriously malfunctioned, though human technicians were reportedly working around the clock to restore them. On crystalline hive worlds, the transportation networks that connected thousands of population centers had entered maintenance mode, causing minor but widespread disruptions. The pattern was clear. Nothing was being destroyed, no one was being harmed, but the invisible human contribution to galactic infrastructure was becoming conspicuously absent. "You're demonstrating our dependence on humanity," Judge Zarthak observed, "but this only confirms our fears about your species' potential for disruption." "You're still not understanding," Sarah said with infinite patience. "We're not trying to show you that we can destroy your civilization. We're trying to show you that we're already part of it. The disruptions you're seeing aren't attacks. They're withdrawal symptoms." The communication display split to show reports from across the galaxy. Systems were failing not because of sabotage, but because the humans who maintained them were stepping back, revealing how dependent galactic civilization had become on human innovation and expertise. Kane leaned forward. "Judge, every system that's experiencing problems right now was working better yesterday because humans improved it. We didn't sabotage anything. We simply stopped maintaining the improvements we've made over the years." "This is coercion," Representative Gillix interjected from somewhere off-screen. "This is education," Sarah corrected. "For 3 years, I tried to convince you that humanity could contribute to galactic civilization. You refused to listen. Now you're seeing what the galaxy looks like without that contribution." The reports continued streaming in. Medical systems reverting to older, less efficient protocols. Communication networks experiencing delays as human-designed routing improvements went offline. Manufacturing processes slowing down as human optimization algorithms were deactivated. Nothing was breaking, but everything was becoming less efficient, less reliable, less capable. Judge Mordun appeared in the transmission, his crystalline form flashing with what might have been understanding. "You're showing us that humanity isn't a threat to galactic civilization. You're showing us that humanity is galactic civilization." "Part of it," Sarah corrected gently. "We never wanted to dominate anyone. We wanted to participate, to contribute, to be partners in building something greater than any of us could achieve alone." The displays around them showed the scope of human integration into galactic society. 2 million humans, spread across 300 worlds, all quietly making the galaxy work better, not through conquest or coercion, but through competence and creativity. "The quarantine you imposed was never about protecting the galaxy from humanity," Kane observed. "It was about protecting your existing power structures from change. You feared that human adaptability would expose the stagnation in your own civilizations." Judge Zarthak was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried centuries of weariness. What would humanity require to restore normal operations and accept some form of regulated coexistence? Sarah and Kane exchanged looks. They had prepared for this moment, but it still felt surreal to be negotiating humanity's place in the galaxy from a position of demonstrated strength rather than pleading for acceptance. "Full diplomatic recognition," Sarah began. "Humanity becomes a member species of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." "Agreed," Zarthak said without hesitation. "Formal acknowledgement that the quarantine was illegal and unjust," Kane continued. "Agreed." "And establishment of a new protocol for evaluating species for galactic membership," Sarah added. one that considers contribution potential rather than just conformity to existing patterns. This request caused visible discomfort among the council members. It wasn't just about humanity anymore. It was about changing the fundamental way galactic civilization approached new species. Many beings will resist such changes, Judge Zenthari observed. Many beings resist all changes, Kane replied. That's exactly the problem. The galaxy has become so focused on stability that it's forgotten how to grow. Sarah stepped closer to the transmission. Judge Zarthak, humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to help it become what it could be. Every species here has incredible potential that's been constrained by fear of change. Humans specialize in unlocking potential. Around them, the data streams showed the first signs of restoration. Human technicians across the galaxy were beginning to bring systems back online, but slowly, demonstrating each repair as an act of cooperation rather than surrender. The Council will need time to consider these terms, Judge Zarthak said finally. Take all the time you need, Sarah replied, but understand that every day you delay, the galaxy becomes a little less efficient, a little less capable, a little less than it could be. That's not a threat. That's just reality. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah and Kane alone in the command center. Around them, the flow of information continued, showing a galaxy slowly beginning to understand that humanity wasn't a foreign invasion to be repelled, but a natural evolution of galactic civilization itself. Do you think they'll accept the terms? Kane asked. Sarah looked at the displays showing human families living peacefully on hundreds of worlds, human engineers solving problems that had stumped alien experts for decades, human artists creating works that moved beings across species boundaries. They don't have a choice, she said simply. We're already here. We're already part of their lives, their systems, their future. The only question is whether they'll acknowledge that officially or continue pretending they can control something that's already beyond their control. 3 days later, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to accept humanity's terms. The vote wasn't driven by fear of human capabilities, but by recognition of human contributions. The withdrawal of human expertise had shown every species exactly how much they had benefited from humanity's presence, even when they hadn't realized it. Ambassador Sarah Chen was formally reinstated and took her place as Earth's representative on the Galactic Council. But more importantly, humanity's approach to integration became the new model for how advanced civilizations should welcome emerging species. The galaxy learned that true strength came not from preventing change, but from embracing it. And humanity learned that sometimes the best way to gain acceptance wasn't to ask for permission, but to prove your worth and wait for others to recognize what they'd be losing without you. The quarantine that was meant to contain humanity had instead revealed that humanity was already the galaxy's future, patient, persistent, and absolutely unstoppable.